Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Evan coming back at you with another Left Unread. And before we get into the meat of the episode, which is going to be Cam's part 3 for the Mongols, before we get into that, lighthearted and joyous story, I did want to talk a bit about the really tragic murder this week of Jordan Neely, who is a homeless man in New York City, who was killed on the New York City subway by a Marine. He was choked to death for something about 15 minutes, with other bystanders actually helping out this man kill him. And the story as it came out is that Mr. Neely was he was a homeless man. He was having some sort of mental health crisis, and screaming and yelling and throwing his jacket and stuff on the subway, which I think if any of you have been on a subway in a major American city, that's definitely something that you have experienced. Or really in certain parts of any major or minor American city. I mean, I see those types of things all the time down my street in front of a liquor store. But regardless, because of this, somebody just decided to grab him and murder him. And I've seen people online describe it, and I don't think unfairly, as a lynching. Mr. Neely was a black man. The man that killed him and the men that were helping him be killed were all white. And, this as yet unnamed assailant was arrested and released without any sort of charges, over the fact that he just murdered somebody who hadn't attacked anybody, hadn't really caused any damage or anything like that. And Mr. Neely apparently was yelling about how he has no food to eat, no water to drink, nowhere to stay, and he doesn't care if he goes to jail. And it came out that, he had been in and out of jail quite a bit, which I think is pretty normal for a homeless man, as homelessness is basically criminalized in this entire country. So oftentimes you can just be arrested for any sort of thing. He also was apparently pretty famous for doing impersonations of Michael Jackson on the subway, and had some small fan base. Apparently, a lot of people really liked seeing him do those impersonations. He seemed to be quite good at. I watched some of the videos, but this is just another instance, I think, of really the how the system that we live under really degrades people. And I mean, I don't really want to speak for the dead or whatever, but by him yelling that he doesn't care if he goes to jail and didn't have food or water or a place to stay, it kind of sounded like he was maybe hoping to get arrested so that he had a place to stay and get food and water,
which is not an uncommon
that's
situation.
Not
folks either hope to get themselves committed to hospitals or if that's not possible, put into jail, just to have a warm roof and a couple
just
of
for a
hot
few
meals.
days. Yeah, just for a few days. And of course, the cretinous right-wing mobs on the internet that are, in my opinion, lower than mosquito shit, and that I would rather faceplant into a pile of dog shit than deal with for more than 5 seconds. Some of these people have really been kind of dancing with joy over the fact that this young man was killed. And it's just, I don't know, it's tough. It's, I think the homeless situation here in America is it's tough. These are people that have fallen through the crack. They're needy. They're probably, the lowest members of our society, the ones that there's nothing below them. And I think the powers that be in this country want this sort of thing to be the case. They want to see, they want you to see this video of a homeless man having a mental health crisis and being murdered. Because basically they're saying, listen, if you don't, accept your meager lot in life, it could get worse. This could be you. And I think that's the reason that, ending homelessness in this country really wouldn't be that expensive or difficult. But I think it is intended by the system that this always be a possibility. And I just want to say that, it's tough to see this, but if, the homeless and these people at the frayed edges of our society are not just somebody that can be discarded like this. These are people, these are members of our community. And if you can't have compassion and empathy and sympathy for them, I don't really know what to tell you. But I mean, seeing this, I don't even know. I don't even know what to say. It's just my heart goes out to him and all of the people dealing with this, and I think we can all maybe try to band together and do something about this when we can and when the opportunity presents itself. And these are not people that we should just push to where we can't see them and forget about them.
Yeah, I think you've said it really well, and you speak for both of us on all of that. And the one thing that I think I'll add is just that, for a lot of us who, are either below the poverty line or working really hard every day to stay just above it, most of us aren't much more than one or two big events away from, the risk of being food insecure or not having a home. And I think a growing part of our population experiences that as a daily reality. So just try your hardest when you read news like this to remind yourself that, this could be you. Mm-hmm. And any one of us are just a few bad days or a few bad events away from being in a much more desperate situation than we are right now. And that should not strip you of your humanity or your basic right to life. And so anyway, that's all. I just wanted to add that, but I think that you said it perfectly for the two of us. And I think with that, let's start the show. All right, well.
So what's going on, Cam?
Hey, what's going on, man? So that's tough to follow that up, but, I think that it had to be said, and I think you did a nice job saying it. So thanks for that. Yeah. What else? Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about before we dive back in?
I got something that we can talk about at the end of the episode, but...
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, yeah, I think that probably makes more sense. No reason to dilute that message. So as Evan mentioned at the start, this is going to be part 3 of my episodes on my series of episodes on the Mongols. We've been focusing part 1, which was, I believe, episode 79, focused on a sort of brief exploration of the world that we are diving into. Episode 2, which was episode 80 of the show. Yeah, I'm sorry, it was episode 81. This is actually going to be, my notes are wrong. This is going to be episode 84. So episode 81 was part 2, where we talked about young Temujin, the boy who would grow up to be Genghis Khan. Yep. And today we're continuing that narrative. So before we dive in, I just wanted to remind you guys, we do keep playlists updated on Spotify. Relevant to this is our playlist titled LU Series, which is where we compile all of our multi-part series of episodes from our show, because as you all know and either love or don't, we don't record our episodes sequentially, because Evan and I I don't know. We got to work jobs and shit. So
yeah, we got lives, so
we do.
We try to hand off the work to each other as much as we can.
we do. And that works, of course, to a certain extent. But so that is just a good place, especially if you are a Spotify user, which the largest section of you are. That's a good place to go if you want to just bang out series sequentially, which actually I hope that's been working, because we've noticed a real uptick in old episode downloads, things like that. So it seems like that playlist has been helpful to you guys. We also I like to mention that we have a playlist rather called LU Rippers, where we upload all of the music from our shows, because I think we choose cool music for a lot of our shows, and some of it's really
we both got
varied.
pretty good taste, I think.
Yeah, if we do say so ourselves.
Yeah,
and
yeah, we're pretty fucking cool. So
yeah, we're pretty neat dudes. So so check that out there if you hear anything on the show and you're like, what song was that? Like last episode I did like all fucking slamming like modern hardcore / deathcore, and then sometimes we do old school hip hop, new rap, fucking Mongolian metal, all kinds of shit. So if you ever want to find any of that stuff, head over there. That's LU Rippers and LU Series on Spotify.
Yeah, our unofficial third Mikesman has appeared too. Sancho, he's a big fan. I think he just really loves when we record. Yeah, he can just constantly walk between my fingers as they hang.
Well, yeah, it's you're in one place, and he can hear your soothing voice. He probably likes your voice,
like dulcet tones.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can hear him meow. It has noticeably appeared once or twice.
Yeah, I very rarely hear it when we're recording, but sometimes I catch it during editing.
Yeah.
And I always make sure to snip it out. No, I'm just kidding. We never do that.
Sancho, yeah. You're not allowed.
He's allowed to be here. All right, so let's dive in. So, so I'm not going to do an exhaustive recap. I would prefer that you go back and listen to the other episodes. You do definitely need to listen to part 2 to understand part 3, which is what we're recording right now. I've sort of made part 1 optional, but you should also listen to that because it was fun to make and it's part of the series.
Yeah. Don't be flaky.
What'd you say?
I said don't be flaky. Listen to all the episodes.
Just listen to all of them.
Yeah.
So last week, we left off with young Temujin and his younger full brother Khasar ambushing and murdering their elder half-brother Belgutei. I'm sorry, their older half-brother Begter. They did not murder Belgutei.
Yeah.
For the crime of conspiring to bang their mom and become their new dad, allegedly.
Yeah.
Following this episode, Temujin was branded as an outlaw and was forced to leave his family behind and flee the justice of the Taichiud clan, who were the dominant power in the northern steppe region where all of our drama has played out up until now. So that, dear listeners, is where we shall pick up the narrative. So murdering your own brother is generally considered a pretty fucked up thing to do in most cultures. And the Mongols of the 12th century were no different. So, after a stern tongue lashing from their mother, and no, this is not a scene from MILF Manor, from their mother Holun.
Yeah, I forgot we talked about MILF Manor last week.
Dude, I know. I have a free 7-day trial to Discovery Plus because last night. So I went to a really dumb concert yesterday, and so I got a little stoned beforehand, and got home, and like all I wanted to do was watch Blue Planet 2.
Yeah.
And so I got a free trial to Discovery Plus, and then afterwards I was like, "Fuck, this means I can watch MILF Manor." So I'm gonna try to watch the entirety of season 1 in the next couple days before I depart for Nicaragua.
Yeah.
So
MILF Manor recap episode 1.
What do you say?
MILF Manor recap episode 1.
I know, dude, right? It's going to have to happen. So Holun is really mad at Temujin and Khasar for killing Begter because of all because of the implication.
Yeah.
So Temujin knows that the Taichiud clan, who had abandoned his family and taken the rest of his own Borjigid clan with them several years prior, is going to be hunting for him. Now, the Taichiuds, as we said, are kind of considered the leading clan of the lands between the Onon River, or around the Onon River where they had been camped. And as such, they took it upon themselves to sort of enact frontier justice upon people that require it. So Temujin catches wind that there's a hunting party of Taichiud warriors who are out seeking him. And he attempts to flee into the nearby mountains. But he is ultimately caught and brought back in chains, but probably like ropes, to the Taichiud camp.
Yeah.
So the thing is, not only had Temujin committed murder, which was obviously in and of itself a crime. We've kind of talked a little bit about the Mongols and how they have these really interesting taboos about bloodshed and murder and sickness and dying, and they don't really like talking about it, which is interesting considering how big of a part violence
into it they are.
Is. Yeah, it's a really interesting juxtaposition. So it's just that's just a part of their culture. So not only has he broken that taboo and committed murder and against a male kinsman, which is like the predominant bond between Mongols. That's how they sort of define all of their politics, their tribal communities, et cetera, et cetera. But he's also now made himself a legitimate contender for dominance of the Borjigid Mongols, his father's clan, who were now subordinate to the Taichiuds. Yasuge, his father, still obviously had living brothers, probably at this point. And remember, there was some sort of controversy in the secret history of the Mongols, which is the text from which our main text derives. As to why Holun didn't marry one of these brothers after the death of her husband. But either way, as the eldest surviving son of the former leader of the Borjigids, Temujin was a potential threat to stability in the region. So if he decides that he's going to start, putting his own squad together and making moves, that could disrupt things for the Taichiuds. Now, you might think the kid would be sentenced to death or something for what he's done. But apparently, the Taichiuds felt that it made more sense not to answer bloodshed with more bloodshed, at least not initially. And you'll see in a second. We don't really know what their long-term plan was for him, because our boy Temujin's not really going to give them a chance to enact that.
Okay. Yep.
So maybe when they'd heard that Begter, they might have heard that Begter was kind of an asshole. And I mean, Temujin's still just a kid at this point. He's in his early to mid-teens. It's not really clear how old he is. So at the very least, they're going to enact some sort of disciplinary course correction to try to break his spirit and get this little whippersnapper in line. So what ends up happening is he's brought back to their camp, and they strap him into a device called a cangue, which is a French word, cangue, cangue. And it's used to describe a sort of torture device or a punishment device that I guess was fairly common in East Asia up until early modern times. You can find photographs of them online. You should look them up because it'll make my ensuing explanation a little clearer. But it's basically a rudimentary wooden yoke of sorts that goes around a person's neck and restricts their movements.
Oh, look at that fucking thing.
Yeah, you can see a picture. I think there's the picture on Wikipedia of like the guy in Shanghai.
The big square shit.
Yeah, so they didn't necessarily have like a uniform design, but the premise is you've got this big wooden yoke around your neck that either does or doesn't bind your hands to it, but either way makes it really hard for you to feed yourself. You can't even really get food on the ground because there's this big wooden frame around your face, so you can't get your face. It's miserable. So you're walking around with this thing on, and while you're in a cangue, a person cannot really effectively take care of themselves. So if they're going to survive, they become entirely dependent on others to keep them alive, to feed them, like literally hand feed them, or they're just going to starve to death and die. The point of this appears to have been to break Temujin's will rather than to starve him to death, because the Taichiuds do allow him to be passed between the various subordinate families that stay with the Taichiud main camp to be fed and sheltered, etc., etc. They don't seem to really actively torment him or torture him. The point is basically just to keep him in the camp and keep him in this thing until he fucking cools off, or they decide what they're going to do with him. So these subordinate families would either be war captives or just families that had pledged, loyalty to the Taichiuds because they were, needed protection or they were starving, whatever. They tend to fall somewhere between the idea of being like slaves and or servants, but they are decidedly subordinate to the Taichiuds themselves. They are less than, and they're not treated especially well. So he would be brought into the homes of these families to sleep. He would have his injuries treated. Apparently there was one family where the children basically begged their father to remove the cangue in secret at night so that he could get like at least one good night's sleep without this thing around his neck, and they cleaned the wounds that had formed around his neck and his wrists.
Yeah, I'm sure your neck would get pretty fucking gnarly.
You would be gross. Yeah, your neck would be gross. He probably had scars from this for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
And who knows how long the Taichids planned to keep Temujin like this, or really what the eventual goal was. Is he going to starve? Is he going to be executed? But obviously, as I said, none of this is going to come to fruition because here we are talking about him. And if he just died in captivity, there probably wouldn't be a point to making any of these episodes. Nobody would have written anything about him. Nobody would remember this random guy.
Yep.
So one day, Temujin, he's still locked in the cangue. And he was assigned to keep watch over a younger boy who was the son of one of the Taichid warriors who had some sort of physical and or intellectual disability. So, they describe him as sort of weak and or feeble, whatever. But so clearly disabled in some way. And so he's supposed to keep watch over him while all the men of the Taichid clan go and have a feast and get drunk and party and whatever. They just don't want to worry about keeping an eye on this kid. So they give that quote unquote lowly job to Temujin.
No.
Temujin, being the kid that he is, I mean, this is a kid who killed his own brother for just like being mean and getting a weird boner for his mom.
Yeah.
He sees his chance, and so he takes the cangue and swings his head around and clocks this kid in the face and knocks him out and runs off. Which is, kind of a dick move, but
not too nice.
He doesn't want to stay imprisoned anymore. He's had this thing on his head long enough, and he's like, sorry, kid, and fucking knocks him out. So he actually ends up getting spotted by that father of that family who had taken the cangue off his neck and treated his wounds. And the guy sees him, and they have this sort of deer in the headlights moment where they both freeze.
Yep.
And rather than yell and raise the alarm, the guy's like, just get out of here. Just run away. Mm-hmm. Run while you can. But Temujin's like, well, I'm still in this cangue. Like, I'm just going to die out there. So he ends up hiding like in a riverbed, and when night falls, he sneaks back and goes to this guy's family's ger, which remember is like a yurt. It's the term for their dwelling. And he asks them to help him. So obviously the family is mortified by this because if they get found with him, he's definitely going to get killed now. I mean, if he wasn't already going to get executed for this murder, he is now like seriously assaulted the disabled child of one of the Taichid warriors. He's like now officially definitely just going to get his head chopped off. Yeah. So, or whatever. They probably wouldn't have done that because they didn't like to shed blood, but they would have killed him somehow. Yep. Strangled him or something. So long story short, the family agrees to help him out, and they remove the cangue, and they even go so far as to roast a little bit of meat for him, a little lamb, according to the secret history, and they give him a horse, which, is a big deal. They're a poor family. They're basically slaves to this larger clan. There's no way they had a lot of horses, which were the main way, as we said in part 1 of this series, that the Mongols and the other steppe groups would, measure wealth, and it was just the horse was the primary everything really for steppe culture. It was transportation, it was food, it was livestock, it was labor, it was everything. And they were sacred at the same time, So the gift of meat and a horse is really significant. So they hide him in a big pile of wool throughout the day while they get, all this stuff together. And the next night, Temujin was off.
Yep. And
so this episode in The Secret History, I think is meant to highlight really 2 things. So first, it's to establish that Temujin clearly has some sort of special quality to him that had enticed these poor people who really had nothing to give to help him and to give him some of their meager possessions. So I think we're supposed to take from this that, he was obviously charismatic or wonderful in some way that people around him just could see even at this early age. And second, which is that from this point on, Temujin is always going to have this sort of lingering distrust of high-ranking folks. You're going to see this later when he's conquering cities. He's much more likely to show mercy to the common people than to the nobility of a conquered city. And again, not famous for his merciful acts, ever.
Yeah, but, not really a major part of his
But you stood a better chance if you were some poor, beaten-down person or a slave or whatever than if you were, the family of a defeated sultan or shah or something. Yeah. he was probably just going to fucking kill you.
Yeah.
So maybe an early supporter of revolution. You know, he was the great leveler.
Yeah.
So accounts differ as to the length of the period of time that Temujin spent in captivity. There are theories that he was held captive just, for 10 years. Some people say that he escaped and was recaptured and escaped and was recaptured, but there was a long period of captivity. And then others, the secret history being the main source for a lot of our stuff, they sort of gloss over this and make it seem like it was just like a couple of months or a couple of weeks even. The decade theory, or this like long repeated captivity theory, would sort of explain why there's this kind of absence of information about like this sort of intermediate period of his childhood. And it seems like it sort of jumps from like his dad dying and the whole episode with him like meeting Borte, his betrothed wife. And then all of a sudden now here we are and he's like about to be an adult by Mongol reckoning. And he's escaping, and it's like, well, what did they do that whole time? So he was either captured a lot younger, or just not a lot happened, and it was just his family, in a camp by the river trying to get by, and he is making blood brothers with Jamuka and all that fun stuff. But so the thing is, if the decade theory is true, there's a couple things about that. So it would look kind of bad for Temujin, if he had been just held captive as a slave for 10 years and done nothing about it. That doesn't really make him look like this big badass guy, right?
Yeah.
He just sort of stood there and took it. But also, if that turns out to be true, it would be really dangerous for the families and successors of the Taichiuds and the groups that had imprisoned him for this period of time. Because obviously we know that Temujin goes on to become the baddest fucking dude in the history of ever.
Yeah.
And if it's true that some people had wronged him this aggressively in the past, himself and his successors, who were also, spoiler alert, Chinggis's sons are no fucking walk in the park either. Yeah. These folks are not going to have it good if people find out that he was enslaved for 10 years. So it's kind of in everybody's best interest to just pretend none of it happened, even if it did. So all the prevailing histories just sort of agree that it was probably just not that long. And whether that's true or not, who's to say?
He had a bad time for a few months.
Yeah. So that's kind of how we're framing it, but
it is possible it was longer.
It's possible that it was longer. And this will be the time that I reiterate it. When you're dealing with a lot of this stuff, the Mongol history is no different from a lot of ancient accounts like this. We've said it in past episodes. It's a propaganda piece. It's ultimately, there's definitely some fiction woven in here. It's thought that it's actually fairly truthful, but who's to say? And so a lot of these details of his early life, they've definitely been zhuzhed up a little bit. That being said, it's a fucking awesome story. It's such a good story. And so we're sticking with it.
Yep.
Either way, whatever turns out to be true, as the story goes, he rides off. He goes to find his mother's camp. They've moved, so he's got to figure out where they are. And he's got to figure out just what the fuck he's going to do with his life.
Before I found this place, it was never near. I was always somewhere else, still I was always here. I used to think I knew my way around, feeling wild and shaky states of mind. I would smile
we're going to fast forward a little bit to the next known chapter in the story of Temujin, of Little Genghis. So it's 1178. Temujin is now 16 years old, and he's considered a man. Keep in mind, he's likely 15 by Western standards. We talked about that in the past. A lot of East Asian countries, they count that first 9 months in the womb as the first year of a child's life. No real need to get bogged down in it, but just he's either 15 or 16. He's not like when we say he's a man, he's not a big old man. He's a teenager still. So it's been 7 years since his betrothed, 7 years since he has last seen his betrothed, Borte. Remember, he went on the field trip with his father to find a wife, and then when his dad left, he got captured and poisoned by Tartars trying to feast with them, and that whole thing. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Because you've definitely listened to part 2. You've definitely listened.
Yeah, you've done your homework.
Listen, if this is all sounding silly, I mean, you gotta just make sure you go back and listen. It's a fucking good story.
That's on you.
Listen, if you don't know what I'm talking about, that's on you. You're absolutely right, Evan.
On you.
And with life, so he hasn't seen Borte in 7 years, right? And with life on the steppe being as bananas as it was, I mean, you guys remember how his mom got, married, right? Quote unquote. She got kidnapped. She was already supposed to be married to another dude, and then here comes Temujin's dad, Yesuge, and he's just like, she's real pretty. I think I'll make her mine. And I already got one of them back home, but I could go for another. And so he's there's no real reason to suspect that Borte is still just at her dad's house, sitting waiting for him to come and collect her. It's more than likely that she's married someone else or been kidnapped or whatever. It's a crazy world out there,
Yep.
But Temujin's the sort of fella we're going to find who kind of likes to find stuff like that out for himself. He's not really a giver-upper. He's sort of a doer. He's a go-getter. He's really driven to succeed. He'd probably be like a Fortune 500 CEO today, and would be just absolutely destroying. He'd be like a corporate raider or something, Mm-hmm. So he grabbed his slightly younger half-brother, Belgutei. Remember, they're still homies.
Yeah, they're cool.
Even though Temujin and his younger full brother Khasar had just murdered Begter, who was Belgutei's older full brother, Belgutei and Temujin seem to have had a really good relationship, because at this stage of their life as teenagers, they get really tight, and Belgutei kind of becomes his number 2 guy for a couple of these escapades.
Yeah.
So they set off and they try to find the camp of Borte's father, De Sechen, along the Kerlen River. So that's actually the same river now that Temujin's own family is camped along. They've moved from the Onon River down to the Kerlen River.
Yep.
So they follow the Kerlen River, and sure enough, they find not only De Sechen's gear, but Borte is still there, and she's still into Temujin.
What's up, Borte?
I know, right? It's good to see you, girl.
Oh,
and
shit.
despite... Damn, you're looking good. You filled out.
Oh.
So despite this whole mess with the Taichiuds and everything that's going on, De Sechen is still kind of liking the looks of little Temujin. He's like, you could be a pretty good son-in-law, my man. You're looking a little muscular. You look like a little badass, dude. Like,
what's going on, my dude?
Marry my girl Borte here.
Yeah.
So, this is considered especially nuts because at this point, Borte is maybe 18, and that's practically a spinster in 12th century Mongol terms. Everybody's like, damn, she's old. I'm not trying to marry.
She should have
18?
3 or 4 kids by this point.
Old. So, and remember, it's traditional for the women in Mongol culture to be a little older than the men.
Temujin about to hit up MILF Manor, dude.
Yeah, dude. Right?
Mongolian MILF Manor.
Dude, Borte's about to be a contestant.
Yeah.
That's so funny. It's the crossover we didn't know we needed.
Yeah, it's the most ambitious crossover event.
Genghis Khan MILF Manor crossover.
Yeah.
I can't wait to watch that show. So anyway, so it all works out, and the 3 of them, Belgutei, Temujin, and now Borte, they set off back to Holun's camp to kind of seal the deal. So traditionally, a bride-to-be, when she's traveling back to her, soon-to-be or new husband's family, she brings a gift of fine clothing, and she presents it to the man's father as sort of a gesture of goodwill, etc., etc. Now, it's clothing because things like gold or whatever, they're heavy and they're kind of impractical. You got to carry them. There's a chance you'll get robbed, whatever. But clothing is great because clothing's beautiful, but it's also practical. So if you give somebody a piece of clothing, not only is that like a nice little thing, like a hey, here, how are you, but also they can use it, and it's going to help keep them warm and keep them alive.
Yep.
So she gives him what is considered kind of a really nice gift. She's got this coat made out of perfect black sable fur.
Nice.
So sables are these little carnivorous members of the marten family. Think of sort of like a weasel. They sometimes climb trees.
Yep.
And they live up here in this part of the world. And their fur is and was highly prized for both its softness and its warmth. So this is like a really, really nice gift. She's doing pretty good here. So Temujin is a smart guy, though, right? She's got this gift. And normally that would be given to Yasuge, his father, but Yasuge is dead. Remember, he got poisoned 7 years ago by the Tatars, those fucks. And so he doesn't need a sable coat. He's fucking worm food.
Yeah.
But you know who would probably like a nice new sable coat? If you're going to say Onkan, the leader of the Karayid tribal confederacy that dominates the beautiful steppe south of the Onon River and north of the Gobi Desert, you probably read ahead in my notes. I knew you. I had a feeling. Well, if you were going to say all that, you would be today's big winner.
Yeah.
We have yet to crown the goose of the week, but today's big winner is you, if you guessed that.
Yes. Yeah.
So Onkan's actual name was
I'm
Torgil.
the beautiful mallard duck of today's episode.
Onkan's actual name is Torgil, and he had been a friend of Yasuge back in the day.
Yeah.
And Temujin figured, hey, the Taichiyud might seem big and bad to him at this point, but they're actually small fry compared to Onkan and the Karayids. And Onkan did used to really like his dad, so maybe if he gives his bride present to him, he'll, like, look after him and protect him and stuff, right? It's a good plan.
Nice.
Well, this is primo step politicking here. It's a really genius play by the young up-and-comer.
Regifting is big.
Yeah. You're going to want to keep an eye on this guy because he could be going all the way, folks.
Yeah.
Temujin's shaping up to be a pretty shrewd operator here.
Yep.
So at this point, the best lands on the Mongolian steppe north of the Gobi Desert are kind of controlled by three major tribal confederacies and their ruling khans. Khans just being the chief, the king, the head guy in charge of a tribe, of a group. And so these are the real big boys in this sort of sphere among both the Mongols and, like I said, it's not just Mongols here. The lines get kind of blurry about who is and isn't a Mongol. There's other groups. But so Onkan and the Karayids hold the center. And they are either Mongols or related to the Mongols. So their lands fall between the Orkhon River and the Tul River. To their west, there's a guy named Tayang Khan, and he holds sway over the Naiman tribe, who I think are also Mongols or Mongol adjacent. Yeah. Then to the east, the lands are controlled not by Mongols, but that's where the Tatars are in control. Yep. And remember, they had killed poor sweet Yasuge 7 years prior.
Yep.
So these three major groups are kind of constantly fighting, not only with one another, obviously, because these are the big boys. They all want to dominate the other guys. Yeah. Everybody wants to be the fucking the great Khan over all these other Khans, a Kagan, if you will. But also fighting the smaller groups around them, and they do that mainly to like assert dominance, but also they try to like beat them in battle so they can forge alliances and get them to help each other fight each other. So they want these small tribes to join up with them so that they can then go fight their real enemies, who are the other big tribes in that central plain. So back in the day, Yasuge, Temujin's father, and Onkan had been Andas, sworn blood brothers. And so you remember we mentioned Temujin has an Anda, this guy Jamuka. And they drank each other's blood, they exchanged arrowheads, that whole deal. You guys remember that, right? Right? Yeah, Again, you really got to go listen to that episode.
Don't we, folks? We remember.
Well, Yasuge had spent a lot of his life fighting under Onkan, first in the war that overthrew Onkan's uncle, Gurkhan, and then against the Merkids. Remember, the Merkids are the family of Holun's original betrothed's family. That guy Chiladu, and they have that whole thing where she throws him. You just go back and listen.
Yeah, go back.
And then finally, the Tatars, against whom Yasuge was fighting when he captured Holun all those years before.
Yeah, the Tatars and their delicious sauce.
Yes. And that's actually, so remember, Temujin is named after a Tatar.
Yeah.
Temujin Uge. So, in the super male kinship-dominated world of the Mongols and their politics, the move Temujin was making here would have been pretty clear to everyone. So, by offering his bride gift of the black sable coat to Khan, Temujin would be asking to be treated as the Khan's son. So, if that's accepted, Khan would be acknowledging himself as the boy's new adopted father. So, leaving Borte back with Holun, it's off to the south, again with Belgutei in tow, to seek a new dad in the mighty Khan of the Cariad tribe.
This is a real Julius Caesar Augustus situation.
It is. I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
So I don't really know a better place to mention it, but I think it's cool to note that the Cariads, as well as the Naimans, who are two of the big tribes here in the central plain, are Christians, which I think is just cool. So they had been converted by missionaries from the Assyrian church a couple hundred years before.
So they were Eastern.
They are. And so by this point, but they're kind of their own thing, because they don't really take with, like, tradition, and they don't have, like,
it's
organized
like
churches.
Kind of.
It's very syncretic. So if you were building this religion in Crusader Kings, there would definitely be, it would be more like, you took Tengri and then did, like, Christian syncretism with it. You know? But Christianity seems to suit these groups. God and Christ could be pretty easily identified with Tenger or Tengri, the endless blue sky. Like the ancient Hebrews, the Mongols are pastoralists, and so they identify with a lot of these sort of cultural motifs that are present, especially in the Old Testament. But also they love the New Testament because, as we've mentioned, they have all these taboos about death and healing. And so here's Christ, who not only himself rose from the dead, but was also able to heal the sick and the dying, and, reverse possessions and all this stuff. So he seems like a really admirable figure to the Mongols. And so the practice of medicine and healing actually kind of becomes central to this strand of Christianity. And lastly, this was really important, Christians could both eat meat, unlike Buddhists, which was also popular among certain groups of steppe tribes, and they not only allowed, but they encouraged the consumption of alcohol, unlike Muslims, who sort of existed now out on the western frontiers of the steppe lands.
Yep.
And so, to the Cariads and the Naimans, Christianity seems like the most logical way to go. They want to get that salvation, but they also want to be able to party.
Fermented horse milk.
That Airag.
Yep.
They also, they built no permanent churches. They operated out of gurs, and they had a pretty loosey-goosey interpretation of scripture. There was a lot of syncretism with their old Tengri religion, but so it wouldn't have really resembled Christianity to folks, say, back in Rome. But they were Christians. They believed in Christ. They liked Jesus. So I don't know. Just thought it was kind of cool.
Yep.
So Temujin and Begter, going back to our narrative here, Temujin and Begter arrive at the camp of Khan, and they present him with the sable coat, and they are extremely warmly received. Temujin is immediately embraced as Khan's son, so everything's going to plan. He's offered command of a war band. He said, well, if you're going to be my son, you want some warriors under you? You want to, like, lead booty? Some of my boys and go out and fucking kill some folks? Yeah. But according to the secret history, Temujin declines this. All he wants to do is go back home, raise livestock and hunt in peace along the Karalan River. He just wants his new father to offer him protection from his enemies, from the Taichiud, so that he can live in peace. He doesn't want any part of the clan struggle. He doesn't want to become a great Khan. His life has been so fucking nuts. All this dude wants is to go home, fuck his wife, have some kids, and hunt, and, like, then just die. So he's like, I'm all set with all that, man. Honestly,
I've had a pretty fucked life to this point. Just trying to bust.
Yeah, I've literally lived a full adult man's life. Yeah. I'm 17. I really just want to go home.
Yeah.
So Khan is down with this. Khan's like a pretty chill dude, and he's like, awesome, dude, no problem. You have any issues, you come get me. Otherwise, go do your thing, son. I love you. I love your dad.
Thing is still open in case you want it.
Yeah.
Go bust some nuts.
Absolutely. And no, pretty much. He's like, come back anytime you change your mind. If you want to go fuck some shit up, you know who to call. You call Papa Khan.
Yeah.
So now, he's gonna go back. He's gonna hang with his wife, and he's gonna get this little clan that he's building together. So the family now includes Temujin. No more Begter. We have canceled Begter.
Yeah, Begter's canceled.
But Begter's younger brother and Temujin's younger half brother Belgutei, and then Temujin's full brothers Khasar, Hachiun, and Temuge. And then there's these two new dudes. There's Burchu,
yeah.
who, according to the secret history, these are like Star Wars names. It's hysterical.
Yeah,
There's Burchu, who Temujin apparently like met while he was trying to chase down some horses that he'd lost. And he ran into.
And now
Burchu
he's just one of the boys.
And then there was Jelme, who the book that I read in Weatherford, they say that Jelme was given to Temujin by his father. I don't know if they're talking about Onkan or Yasuge. They don't really describe why. But Jelme might be a slave, but it seems like he's kind of treated more just like one of the boys. So, he's part of the squad now.
Yeah.
Either way, he's not like in captivity. He's like out riding and fighting, and he's one of Burchu and Jelme are like the two first dudes that aren't blood relatives of Temujin, besides Jamuka, to like just join up with him and like help his family, whatever. So then for women, there's Borte, his new wife. There's Holun, his mother. There's his sister Temulun. And then there's Belgutei's mom, Xochitl, and another old lady who is just the old lady. She doesn't have a name. So she's the old lady. But she rocks, and she's going to be awesome in a second. So there's 7 teenage boys to hunt and protect the family, 5 women to tend to the homestead. Things are looking up. They're finally, like, they've got enough people, and they've moved to the Caroline River. Things are looking pretty good. And this is really all he wants. He just wants to be left in peace. He doesn't want any trouble. But that's not how things work on the steppe. There is no trouble. Old wrongs are always remembered. Vengeance is a way of life. So even though they're this small and kind of insignificant fledgling clan, they have not gone unnoticed.
Yep.
The Merkids, from whom Holun had been stolen all those years ago by Yasuge, they had this guy Chiladu who was supposed to marry her. They didn't forget that. And they figured out who Yasuge was. They figured out that he was dead. They figured out that his son was back and he had this stupid little family. And they also figured out that he had this hot new wife that he just brought back. And they thought to themselves, man, even though that was almost 20 years ago, wouldn't it be fucking sweet to swoop in and steal this kid's wife because of what his dad did? And so that's the thing. They don't want Holun. She's old. She's like in her 30s, dude. She's gross. Nobody wants that.
Yeah.
But there's this hot new chick, Borte, who, again, is a MILF at this point at 18. They want to snatch her up.
Yep.
And they're going to marry her off to one of their guys, and the cycle of vengeance and violence will continue. And this seems like the perfect time. So this could, potentially, if you were looking for this sort of thing, shape up to be some sort of a foundational experience for young Temujin, who up till now seems to be on kind of a pacifistic track, which doesn't really make sense considering he's going to become this sort of globe-conquering juggernaut.
Yep.
So theoretically, who's to say? This may or may not end up pushing this kid in some kind of direction.
Yep.
So early one morning, while everybody at Temujin's camp is asleep, a Merkid raiding party comes fucking thundering down out of the hills towards the camp. Now, the old woman, who again is just the old woman, she feels the vibrations of the horse's hooves, and she jumps up, and she wakes up the men. And they scramble, they grab their weapons, they grab their stuff, they grab Holun and Temulun, Temujin's sister, and they fucking book it out of there. They leave Xochitl, they leave the old woman, and they leave Borte behind. Oof. And we talked about this. There's no real room in steppe life for like chivalry, for fancy schmancy codes of honor. This is a super calculated move. If they stay behind and fight, they're outnumbered. They're probably just all going to get killed, and then the women are going to get stolen anyway. If they leave a couple women behind, this is going to distract the raiders long enough to allow the men to regroup, make a plan, and either get revenge, plan a rescue, or, well, just figure out what to do to keep the family together.
Yep.
So while the Merkids are trashing their camp, doing who knows what to the ladies, and hunting around looking for him, Temujin stays on the run. He's hiding in the woods of this nearby mountain called Burkan Khaldun.
Yep.
And he stays there for days while the Merkids prowl around searching for him, and they eventually give up. They take their captives back to their homeland across the mountains on the Selenge River. So Temujin now had to decide what to do. So he could abandon Borte after all this time, and he could go on to find a new wife. But at this point, he knows that getting someone else to betroth the daughter to him, he's already getting kind of old. And frankly, he's already lost one wife to stronger men. Who's going to want to give him their daughter? It doesn't really seem like he can hold on to a daughter.
Yep.
So he's probably going to have to kidnap one. And he doesn't like the sound of that. He saw what his mom grew up with Yasuge and Xochitl and the situation with Begter and all that stuff. And he said, I'm not kidnapping a woman and marrying her. I want my wife. So the other option is He could go and save Borte. But how's he going to do that? Because he doesn't really have anything. He's kind of weak, and he doesn't have a lot going on for him.
Yeah.
So he decides that since Burkhan Khaldun had just sheltered him and saved him, he's going to pray to the spirit of the mountain for guidance on what to do. And so here, I would like to actually read a little excerpt from the book, Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World by Jack Weatherford,
Yep.
because I think that they did a really, really, really nice job sort of summing up this period here. The Mongols divided the natural world into two parts, the earth and the sky. Just as the human soul was contained not in the stationary parts of the body, but in the moving essences of blood, breath, and aroma, so too the soul of the earth was contained in its moving water. The rivers flowed through the earth like the blood through the body, and 3 of those rivers began here on this mountain. As the tallest mountain, Burkhan Khaldun, literally God Mountain, was the Khan of the area, and it was the earthly place closest to the eternal blue sky. And as the source of 3 rivers, Burkhan Khaldun was also the sacred heart of the Mongol world. The secret history relates that Temujin, grateful for having escaped death at the hands of the Merkid, first offered a prayer of thanks to the mountain that protected him and to the sun that rode across the sky. He made special thanks to the captured old woman who had saved the others by hearing like a weasel. To thank the spirits around him, as was Mongol practice, he sprinkled milk into the air and on the ground. Unwinding his belt from his robe, he hung it around his neck. The sash, or belt, traditionally worn only by men, was the center of a Mongol man's identity. For Temujin to remove his sash in this way was to remove his strength and to appear powerless before the gods around him. He then removed his hat, put his hand on his breast, and dropped down onto the ground 9 times to kowtow before the sun and before the sacred mountain.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, dude, rules, right? So famously, he does this for 3 days, right? He stays up there, and he prays for 3 days, figuring out what to do. And it's said that he realized, after 3 days, that he had 3 choices, represented by the 3 rivers that flow from the foot of Burkhan Khaldun. So first there's the Kerlen River, which is the river that he had been camped on when they got attacked. And he could just go back there and kind of pick up where they left off. And he could rebuild. But, you know, no matter how many new wives he took or whatever, he would always be risking further attacks from the Merkids, who obviously knew where he was and could just come back over the mountains anytime if he didn't do anything about it, to just keep raiding them. Mm-hmm. Second, he could return north to the Onon River of his childhood. And he could survive there, but remember, the place that he grew up is pretty harsh and pretty shitty. And so he was just starting to get comfortable. So he doesn't want to go back to that and eat rats for dinner, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or third, he could follow the Tool River south, and he could appeal for help from his adoptive father, Onkan, and he could go fuck up some Merkids. So I don't know. What do you think he's going to do?
I think our boy is going to see Daddy Onkan.
I think you might be right.
Bridges will burn.
So up until now, the secret history has asserted that Temujin's reluctance to engage in the constant tribal warfare of the steppe is like a prevalent feature of his personality. However, he also truly seems to love Borte, which is kind of unique, and that's really highlighted in this book. So in his prayers on Burkhan Khaldun, he had betrayed a great deal of public emotion, which is something that a man was not generally expected to do. He had decried of his shattered heart, his empty breast, his empty bed, and how empty his life was without Borte in his life.
And his full balls.
She's the one fucking person that had ever made him happy. His full balls. She's the one person that had ever made him happy. And I think we can agree, right? This kid's not had like a great life by any metric. It's been a pretty fucked up time. And he finally met someone that like gets him, and she waited for him, and she makes him happy. He loves her. Yeah. He's never been happy really before, and so then there's this like pretty girl, and she's like, "Yeah, dude, I like you. I'll marry you." And he's like, "Great, you're my favorite person ever. I'll literally like follow you to the ends of the earth." And conversely, he will move heaven and earth to get her back. That's what he's decided. Mm-hmm. So he's going to go south to Onkan. But he's not going to go back and beg like some peasant. He's going to show up in camp and demand the right of a son to ask his father's aid in getting vengeance against those who have wronged him. Luckily, because Onkan doesn't have to do this, he's a big, powerful dude. And even though he's embraced Temujin as his son, he could just as easily like dodge this and be like, I've got plenty of pretty girls here. Take a new wife, like whatever. But luckily, he hates the Merkids himself. He's like, dude, fuck
he's like, the fucking who?
Yeah, the Merkids did that shit to my boy.
Temujin,
also
get on the
really,
fucking horse. We're going.
I think he really likes Temujin, because Temujin's got moxie. And I think he sees this kid, and he's like, I fucking knew it. I knew you were going to come back ready to crack some skulls, dude. Yeah. The Merkids? Say no more, my man. Yeah. Say less.
I prayed for this day, my son.
I've been waiting. So he pretty much immediately agrees that the only thing to do is to get the boys together and go break some fucking heads. So he suggests that before they go, Temujin should ride out and seek the aid of this other young Khan in the area, who has been gaining prestige recently and glory for his clan, the Jadaran clan. And he's got a feeling that Temujin might remember who this guy is, because this guy is named Jamuka.
Yep.
And the old Khan had a feeling that he might be willing to ride out into battle with his sworn blood brother for the first time as grown men. And this shit gets me so amped up. I have goosebumps right now. I fucking love this story. I think it's so cool. So the forces of Onkan and Jamuka join up with Temujin's small band of like 7 guys, and they gather at the foot of Burkhan Khaldun, and they're going to sweep across the mountains into Merkid territory. So it's said that, despite the fact that he's been through a lot and had some serious scraps in his life, Temujin has not been on any raids. He didn't grow up with a dad. He didn't go out doing this shit, and he just wanted to fucking be left alone. So he hasn't gone on any like organized like battles or raids to this point. But he shows himself to be a very able warrior and commander. He fights bravely alongside his adopted father and his blood brother, as well as his actual brothers and his clanmates.
Yep.
The Merkid are totally surprised by this attack, and they get scattered like flies. They run like fucking pussy bitches. So Temujin, while everybody's attacking, they're, tearing down Gurs and taking captives and killing the men, whatever, stealing horses, that's a big thing. He's racing from, little camp to camp across the whole Merkid greater camp area, and he's calling out, Borte, Borte. And anybody that stands in his way, he's just fucking cutting them down.
Yep.
Borte, meanwhile, had been given to another man as a wife, and so she'd been packed away in a cart and was being led away from battle. And she had no idea who was attacking. She's as scared as everyone else. She's just thinks, okay, fuck, I better hide so that I don't get captured again. And and plus, she's a little concerned for her personal well-being, and we'll see why in a little bit.
Yeah.
So she's thinking she's just got to hide so she doesn't get captured by some other guy, and now she's got to marry a third dude. But suddenly, rising above the clash of steel and the loosing of arrows and the carnage of battle, she hears a familiar voice. She hears Temujin calling her name, and she leaps from the cart and starts running towards it. Temujin, not seeing who it is in the pre-dawn darkness, he hears somebody coming up behind him, and he whips around, sword drawn, ready to fucking cut them down. And then at the last minute, he realizes it's Borte. And they lock eyes, they see each other, he drops everything, and they embrace right there on the battlefield, and it's like, I love you so much, I've missed you, whatever. And this, I just fucking think this rule's so hard. This could so easily be a fucking TV show. People would go bananas for this shit.
Yep.
I think one of the main reasons, honestly, that something like Vikings gets made and this doesn't get made is because this is about, like, non-white people.
Yeah, no,
And people get
100%.
so fucking hard for, like, just, like, Vikings and shit. Nobody would get as excited. No, by nobody, I mean fucking dumbass fucking racist white audiences wouldn't get as excited to see, like, an East Asian love story.
Yeah,
But, like,
I don't think the fan base of Vikings leans too far to the left.
no, I don't think so either. There's, you know what they're watching right now is fucking Yellowstone. That's
Yeah.
what the fan base of Vikings has moved on to.
Yeah.
Fucking country redneck soap opera.
Yeah.
But this would be, like, just the fucking greatest show. It's got everything. It's got everything. So, having devastated the Merkids, the Mongol Confederation decides that their mission is accomplished, and they're going to withdraw. Temujin has repaid the pain that the Merkids have inflicted upon him tenfold. He's destroyed their homes, he's taken their horses, killed their men, and captured their women. And now, most importantly, he has his beloved Borte back. And so he turns and he says this awesome quote to the men, which sounds like, I think they kind of tried to quote this in Conan the Barbarian.
Oh, yeah.
We have made their breasts to become empty. We have made their beds to become empty. And we have made an end of the men and their descendants. And we have ravished those who remained. The Merkid people being so dispersed, let us withdraw ourselves. And so there's a part in Conan the Barbarian when he's talking to, like, an obvious Genghis Khan character, and he's like, Conan, what is best in life?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah,
to crush your enemies, to see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of their women. Yeah, it's an amazing quote, and I think it's pretty clearly based on this. So, also, Xochitl, who was Yasuge's other wife, and Belgutei's mother, and the old woman, who's awesome, never get found, and I don't really know that anybody looked for them too hard.
Yeah.
Too bad, so sad, but I thought I should mention it, that they are lost to history.
Peace, bitches.
And the army is now going to begin their long trek back to the southeast. So Temujin now is like, great, everything's coming up, Temujin. I got my wife back. I've established myself under my new father-in-law. I met Jamuka again. Like, this guy's great. Maybe I'll go stay with him for a little while. And I just won a great victory for my new adoptive father, Onkan. I've found out I'm pretty good at it. So maybe there is something to this raiding thing. Maybe I could do some of that on the side while I'm raising my family.
And then his eyes look down.
Seems like everything's working out pretty good, right?
Yeah.
And then, he looks down.
What the fuck is that?
Borte's got a baby bump. There's a bun in the oven. Now, the thing about it is this. Let's say she's been captured for 3 months. She's about 3 months pregnant.
Yeah.
So this could be Temujin's baby. But she had also been given to this other guy as a wife. It could be his wife, his baby too. This fucking shithead Merkid who stole her from him.
Yeah.
Was Temujin the father? Is it this Merkid bastard? I don't know, man. But this feels like a pretty fucking good place for a cliffhanger.
Yep.
Because things have not stopped getting dramatic in our story, and it's just gonna keep on going in the next installment of Left Unread Presents The Mongols.
What do you call yourselves? The Mongols.
So that's I was really struggling to. My initial notes for this were a couple pages longer, but then I felt like this was like the best place.
Yeah,
to
this is
off,
a good place to stop.
Fucking great, great ending.
Yep.
And I hope you guys are as amped as I am, because literally I fucking love this story.
It's an awesome
I think this
story.
I think this story is so goddamn good, and I gotta recommend again. I gotta shout out Genghis Khan in the Making of the Modern World by Jack Weatherford. Mm-hmm. It tells this whole story. And especially in these parts where we're talking about the early life of Genghis, I'm working pretty much exclusively from that book because, I don't know, I just like the way that he frames the narrative, so I want to give him all due credit. That's really the backbone of all of this. And I got to recommend that book because I think it's a great read, and it's not, some super inaccessible text. It's really fun. It's a good read. This is my third time through it for this episode, and so all shouts out to Jack Weatherford because he probably, I don't remember, but this might be the book that really got me amped up on Genghis Khan. It's just does such a good job of telling the story. So, and
Awesome.
then I know there was something else that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, just really
to round out the
briefly.
show today.
So, the Writers Guild Association strike. These are the people that write the shows and movies that you like in Hollywood. They're on strike right now, and the big point of contention is AI. So the Writers Guild wants to basically outlaw AI being used whatsoever in any way, shape, or form by the studios and producers. And that's what the sticking point was that caused them to strike. And the studios and producers claim that they will only use AI to, get bare bones stories for scripts, but then they will pay the unionized members that cost money when AI doesn't to flesh out and finish the script and rewrite. And so I just want to go back to the Dalai Lama. I think it was the Dalai Lama episode where I talk about how there's this looming clash coming over AI and what happens when AI starts to take people's jobs. Things like people writing scripts, people doing journalism, lawyers, all that kind of stuff. And I just felt like that was pretty prescient because it's immediately happening.
Yeah, of course it is. And I don't know. It's like, how seriously can you take like the promises of like a Hollywood movie?
You can't.
Studio?
You cannot take fucking the employer's promises seriously. Never. You are a fucking mark if you believe your employer when they said that they will not use this free thing to take over your paid job. Yeah. So good on them. Strike no and reason. Don't fucking stop striking until you get that fucking concession.
Yeah, I think everybody should be behind not only the writer's strike, but when you see strikes in general, you should be immediately skeptical of
fucking union bust. Do not cross the picket line.
No, fuck that.
Solidarity
you should be immediately skeptical.
Fucking ever.
You should be immediately skeptical of any, and I mean fucking any media source or article that suggests that you do anything other than just support them. You should absolutely, because here's the thing: those people,
fucking ever.
Those people, no matter what anybody in charge wants you to think, whether their job is similar to yours or different from yours, whether their pay rate is similar to yours or different from yours, if they do not control, if they do not profit directly and the most from the means of production,
and their labor is being alienated from them.
Yeah, they are you. They are the same as you, and like most of us, they are being juiced dry for the fucking equity that they create with their labor.
Yeah,
and any news source or any article that suggests that you should show them anything but unwavering support, fuck them. Like, fuck them.
And solidarity forever.
You'll see that shit from, the obvious ones. You'll see that shit from Fox News, but you'll see that shit from NPR. You'll see that shit from CNN. Because why? They're all owned by fucking millionaires. I mean, maybe not NPR, but like...
No, NPR takes fucking gigantic donations from like major corporations.
Yeah, that's what underwriters are. There's no advertising, but there is underwriting.
Yeah.
Like, ugh. And I like NPR as much as anything else. I mean, look, if I'm going to listen to the news, if I'm going to listen to the news, it's probably going to be that. And even that, you got to take that with a spoonful of salt.
I can't stand NPR.
Well, Evan only gets his news from UncleBingBongs.com, which is a very niche website. But Evan's a big Uncle Bing Bong stan.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Bing Bong.
He's one of the Bing Bong boys, and we love him for it. I don't blame him. But they sort of speak their own language over there that I have yet to parse. I can't break through on. I can't call myself. I can't count myself among their number.
Anyway. Just wanted to say that Left Unread says solidarity forever. We have solidarity with the WGA and their strike, and thanks everybody for listening.
Yeah, fuck yeah, we absolutely do. And I hope that one day one of these fucking embattled writers will write the show of my dreams and write my fucking sweeping Genghis Khan fucking drama TV show.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. I hope it comes through, but this particular series is like my favorite thing that I've ever done on this show. And we've been having so much fun in general with the episodes lately. Thank you so much for listening. Yep. Links will be in the episode notes to Twitter, to email. Reach out to us. Keep giving us ideas. Listen to the show. Pass us on to your friends and your loved ones. And we'll just keep doing our thing. I also just wanted to note that, when isn't our release schedule wonky, but like it's going to be a little wonky the next couple of weeks. I'm going away to visit the glorious paradise of Nicaragua, and but we've got some cool shit planned for like during that time. So episodes will still be in the works and will still be getting released. Things just might be
wonky.
I don't know. You might notice that like the timelines seem a little fucked up because we might have to record some shit in advance or whatever. So, but Left Unread will be back soon with many great things.
It sure will.
All right.
All right.
You guys have a great week or whatever, and we will see you whenever we're back.
Peace.
Bye.